All right, thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to come participate in this activity with us. As most of you know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so I think this is the perfect time to announce a new initiative that will change the way law enforcement agencies respond to domestic violence situations in St. Tammany Parish. Last year, unincorporated St. Tammany Parish experienced an increase in the number of homicides for a total of 17 people murdered, and nearly half of those homicides involved domestic violence. When I took office in 2015, I realized that we needed to make some changes in our domestic violence unit, and part of those changes was to dedicate more resource to that particular area. We had a single prosecutor, a part-time investigator, and a tremendous backlog of domestic violence cases. Many of those prosecutions ended up being thrown out because time had expired for us to prosecute the case. And in other instances, by the time we screened the case, we investigated it, so to speak, at the DA side, the victim had changed her mind or his mind about testifying against the offender. And that often meant that we didn't have the evidence then to go forward with the prosecution, and so these cases would be dismissed. So consequently, I made a decision that we had to dedicate more resources to this division to get the results that the people deserve. So I increased the staff by adding a second full-time prosecutor, making the investigator position full-time as well, and adding a full-time victim assistance coordinator and dedicating a full-time secretary to the domestic violence unit. And I want to introduce those people who make up the team of individuals at the district attorney's office handling our domestic violence docket. The two attorneys are Assistant District Attorney Roy Burns and Assistant District Attorney Joe Heller. Finally, we added a victim assistance coordinator, Lindsay Rivenbach, and we have an investigator named David Bouchereau. And finally, a secretary, Mitchell Murphy. They operate as a team, they work as a team, they all deserve credit for the wonderful results we've been able to obtain in our domestic violence prosecuting unit. They do a great job. Let me give you some of the statistics concerning that great job. In 2014, the year before I took office, there was a total of 224 domestic violence cases that were dismissed, 224. Last year, in 2017, because of the changes we've implemented, the number of cases that were dismissed dropped to 54. That's a 75% decline in cases dismissed. And by the way, I should say that the docket itself, the number of cases coming in, has been relatively flat. We've also changed a number of procedures to improve our chances of a successful prosecution. So in addition to adding personnel, we've made operational changes in how we're handling those cases. For example, our victim witness coordinator, Lindsay Rivenbach, now reaches out to the domestic violence victim within hours of an incident. And that initial contact is important because it is during that small window of time that the victim often makes a decision about whether or not to cooperate with the prosecution. And all of these changes have helped us to not only decrease the number of cases dismissed, but also to increase the number of domestic violence convictions dramatically. We're getting more guilty pleas, and more of the guilty pleas are pleading guilty as charged as opposed to a reduced charge. And an example of that, statistically, is that in 2014, 75 accused defendants pled guilty as charged. Last year, in 2017, 139 defendants pled guilty as charged. So those are fantastic results, and they're the result of a lot of teamwork, not only within my office, but also within the law enforcement community. But let me get to the point of why we're here today. Several months ago, my criminal division chief, Colin Sims, began putting together what he called a domestic violence coordinated community response team, because we realized we needed changes not only in our office, but changes, improvements in coordinating with other law enforcement partners. And this program is modeled after one that has been operating in Ouachita Parish, which is the city of Monroe. That's where Monroe is located. And they've seen tremendous drops in the reports of domestic violence and domestic violence homicides since they've implemented their group in 25. So the results of this should not only be more successful prosecutions, but over time, if we had, for instance, if we have the same results, instead of 17 homicides in unincorporated St. Tammany Parish, and half of those are domestic violence, if we get the same results that they had in Ouachita Parish, we might have had 4 less homicides in St. Tammany Parish. That's a fantastic, that's a terrible statistic that we had 17 homicides, but if we can reduce that by 4, we've made tremendous, tremendous progress. And we believe we can do that. So at this time, I want to call to the podium Colin Sims, who is the leader of our criminal division at the DA's office and the person who has been spearheading the CCRT program. I'm going to let him tell you about the agreement that's been signed with our law enforcement partners and with other private agencies, and give you some details about how this program and this team will work together to improve the safety of our community. Colin Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. This is a big day for the parish of St. Tammany. You have 12 agencies that have come together and identified that we have a problem in this parish. We want to come together and solve it. Not just law enforcement, your clerk of court has entered into this agreement, probation and parole, all the law enforcement agencies, your district attorney's office, have all agreed that we need to come together and have some uniformity in the way we approach this problem. That's the entire objective of this agreement, is to figure out how to bring victim services, a very measured response to this community together, not umpteen different agencies doing different things, but collectively meeting and discussing protocols, policies. The district attorney's office is a reactive agency traditionally. So we can put people in jail. We can provide victim services on the back end. But it has to be a holistic approach. And that's what this agreement has done. That's what your sheriff has agreed to do. That's what the chief of police of Covington, Slidell, Mandeville, Madisonville, Pearl River, all have agreed to do. That we're going to come together and figure out, when we go to respond to a call, we're going to respond the same way. Not 5 different ways, not 5 different time periods, the same way. So how do we get there? Well, we agree that we're going to start meeting quarterly. We're going to bring together all of our policies. We're going to agree on one set, one way of how to respond to this type of crime. We're going to partner with Safe Harbor. We're going to make sure as a DA's office, within 48 hours of someone's arrest or earlier, we get the victim services, we provide safety, assurance, and confidence in this system. Because with confidence, someone becomes brave enough to say, hey, what happened to me is not okay. I trust you guys in this entire system to stand up and put this offender behind bars. But we're also here to hold your hand through the process. And we're also here to make sure you get the right services and things that you need to move forward behind this point, so that this point and this thing that happened to you doesn't define you. And that's the objective of the agreement. So we've started meeting, not formally, and now we have formalized it. And some of the things we've already identified is law enforcement forming committee. When you respond, this is how we're going to respond. These are the questions we're going to ask. This is what we're going to assess. I tend to be long-winded, I'm sorry. But this is very detailed. We had a very significant change in the laws that passed recently. You have far more offenses that are now going to be felonies. I think as we looked from 2017 statistics, we expect to have 150 more felony cases we have to deal with that are domestic related. How is law enforcement going to respond? How are we going to handle that from the judiciary to the prosecution to the defense? That's what this is about, to come together and figure out answers to problems as opposed to just figuring it out individually. And that's what we're committed to doing. Thank you. But I also want to identify, just for the record, who has signed this. Chief District Attorney has signed it. Chief Randy Smith has signed it, Sheriff of St. Tammany Parish. Chief Gerald Sticker, Mandeville Police Department. Chief Randy Fandle, Slidell Police Department. Melissa Henry, your clerk of court, has signed and agreed to come together to fix this problem. Woody Griffith with Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services. Former Chief of Police Tim Lentz, representative at the time this document was signed, Covington Police Department. Chief J.J. Jennings, Pearl River Police Department. Chief Bo Killingsworth of Folsom Police Department. Chief Barney Turney, Madisonville Police Department. Thomas Bickham with Louisiana Probation and Parole. And Kim Kirby, the Executive Director of Safe Harbor. That's a lot of people to get on the same page to form this type of commitment to solve this problem. I just wanted to name it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Mr. Montgomery, Judge John Brecker, Melissa Henry, local law enforcement agencies, and particularly Kim with Safe Harbor, I'm sorry. I'm here to issue a proclamation on behalf of the City of Covington. Whereas domestic violence is a pattern of control in a relationship where one person uses coercion and violence to gain power and control over his or her partner. And whereas domestic violence impacts many without regard to age, race, religion, or economic status. As victims suffer, it affects their children, families, and entire communities. And whereas Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October provides us with a special opportunity to advance efforts to prevent and end domestic violence. And whereas one person can make a huge difference in the life of a victim, helping them find safety and making them more resilient to the efforts of domestic violence. And whereas we can all support victims of domestic violence and share the goals of this month-long observance by supporting the work of public and private entities that strive to provide the best coordinated response to domestic violence in our community, sending a clear message to abusers that domestic violence will not be tolerated. Now therefore I, Michael B. Cooper, Mayor of Covington, do hereby proclaim October 2018 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the City of Covington and call this proclamation to the attention of all of our citizens, encouraging their awareness and support to help in domestic violence and the harm it causes. Thank you.